Hamas says the goal, Article 7 of the Hamas mandate, they say our goal is to annihilate the Jews and annihilate Israel. So whenever they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, what they mean is it will be free of Jews. Okay, kill the Jews, commit a genocide of Jews, get rid of them, and then take over that entire place. That is what that slogan means. Them going out and slaughtering the Jewish women, children, everyone, burning them alive, chopping off their head, and all these things. And a country like India has to now act because you have constitutional provisions that curtail free speech. You cannot even, criticize Islam factually. Okay, forget ridiculing it or mocking Islam or anything, and you can go to jail for nothing. Get the hell out of Gaza City. Your children will be safe. Okay, and then all along you were celebrating, you elected Hamas. Now you tell Hamas, go and surrender on your knees in front of before IDF. Have they ever done it? No, not even one of them. Okay? Today's topic is about the Israel-Hamas war, which started with Hamas terrorists attacking Israel on the 7th of October and they killed about 1,400 Israeli civilians in the process. And what I'm planning to do today is to start with a complete genesis of the problem, how it started in what we call Israel today, and why is that, what is motivating terrorists like Hamas, but also what is motivating the global Muslim reaction. Okay, and then third, what should be the way forward. In the process of doing that, I'll address some of the questions that may arise in your mind, like what do we do with the civilian deaths and all of those things. Okay? But before I get into any of that, I want to start with a little bit of the context here. So when you take the Jewish community, the Jewish people, they are the followers of Judaism. Large number of them lived in what you call Israel today. They have always lived there for the last 3,000 years or so. However, both Christianity and Islam are very anti-Semitic religions. Both of them preach hatred of Jews. So when the Jewish people, they moved to Europe, they faced a lot of discrimination, a lot of subjugation by the Christians. All of that finally ended up in the Holocaust when Hitler came to power under the Third Reich in 1940 to 1945. But even prior to that, all of the Christian luminaries, whether it's the different popes, whether it's reformers, Protestant reformers like Martin Luther, Calvin, name all of them were very, very anti-Semitic, and anti-Semitism in Christianity has been running for centuries and centuries. So finally it got intolerable for most of the Jewish people. So around 1878, they started a significant relocation back to what they called Israel. And this was supported to some extent by the United States, not so much by the UK or England, but to a lesser extent, they also supported. So what happened in this case was the Jewish people are facing a lot of persecution all across Europe, and they wanted to move back to Israel, where already Jews were living, and about 32% of the population of Palestine then. I use the word Palestine and Israel interchangeably, but they mean the same. So they were Jewish, and hence the Jewish people thought that's the only safe place for us to go to. And then it's not only the Jews from Europe who relocated like that. Jews from other Arab countries, all Muslim majority countries, they also faced persecution because Islam is also a very anti-Semitic religion. Islam also preaches hatred of Jews, and Muslims have always persecuted the Jews just like the Christians have. And a large number of Jews were living in Arab Muslim countries. And by the time of around 1940 to 1947, roughly 900,000 Jews were living outside of Palestine, but within the rest of Arab Muslim world. That is countries from Iraq to Egypt to Morocco to Libya to Arabia to Yemen, everything. In all of those countries, 900,000 Jews were living amidst very hostile Muslim neighbors. So they all wanted to move to Israel so that they could be safe. They don't have to face persecution anymore. And how did they go about buying property in Israel? It's not as if they went and encroached upon the property. They were in no position to do that because the Jewish people were weak. They were persecuted. They were coming from all over the place, converging on Israel. And hence they did not have the political power or the military might to take on the local Muslims in Palestine and encroach upon their land. That's not what happened. Between 1878 and 1948 was when Israel was formed. So in those 70-year period, the Jewish people were creating funds, and those funds were mostly endowed by other rich Jews living in either US or parts of Europe. And then they went and bought land from Muslim landowners, from Arab Muslim landowners in Palestine. So Palestine at that time was ruled by the British, and the British were continuing to implement the Ottoman laws. So how much did they pay for these lands? So there are some very interesting statistics available. And in 1944, for example, the Jewish people paid $1,100 per acre to buy arid or semi-arid land in Palestine. Some of those lands are also marshlands full of malaria and mosquito-infested lands, and that's the kind of land they bought. So to set things in context, what does $1,100 per acre mean in 1944? At the same time, in the United States, very, very fertile land where everything grew was available for $110 per acre. So in other words, the Jews paid 10 times more than prime agricultural estate in the US for arid or semi-arid or marshlands in Palestine. So they were not encroaching upon, they were actually buying the lands. And when they bought the lands, who sold the lands to them? The lands were sold to them by Arab landlords, Arab Muslim landlords. So these landlords were not cultivating or anything, and they were mostly leasing it out to other Muslims for, rearing their sheep and graze lands and all of these things. So when they sold, obviously, the new owner, who are the Jews, will have to evict the lessees. And that's what they did. And they did it according to law. That's what we will do. If you go and buy a new home in New Delhi or something like that, then you will evict the previous lessee. Okay, that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. And they did it according to law, which were enforced by the British, but those were the Ottoman laws, which means those are the laws created by the Muslims themselves. And the Ottomans only lost power in the First World War. Until then, they were in power. So in 1944, Jewish people paid 10 times for arid or semi-arid land in Palestine than what one would have paid for fertile, rich soil in the United States. It did not end there. So what happened to the 900,000 Jews who were living in rest of Arabia outside of Palestine? So they were all terrorized by the Muslims, and then they were chased out, and then all the countries repeatedly warned. Okay, they warned on every forum. For example, they went on United Nations General Assembly, okay, and then they warned that the Jews will not be safe in our country, and we will chase them out, and we'll cleanse them, and they declared them persona non grata. Okay, they said, since Israel is being formed, these people, we will not recognize the Jews as citizens in our country. So they had to flee. And when they fled, they were not compensated for any of their houses, their lands, their businesses, their property, and all of the other assets they were having in those Muslim countries. So 900,000 Jewish people lost everything. They were ethnically cleansed by the Muslims and chased out of their own homes where they have lived for thousands of years in Arabia, and not even compensated. So if at all somebody usurped anything, it was the Arab Muslims who usurped the land, property, houses, wealth, and even jewelry, and even bank accounts and everything the Jewish people had. So contrary to the narrative presented in the mostly left-driven media, it's not that the Jews were the occupiers of Palestine. It's the other way around. The Jewish property and the Jewish homes and everything the Jewish people have had for thousands of years were forcibly taken and stolen by the Muslims of Arabia, and the Jews were chased away as refugees, and that's how they landed in Palestine. And in Palestine, between 1878 and 1948, until the formation of Israel, every acre of land they bought, the Jewish people bought that legitimately by paying a premium. They paid the premium to the Arab Muslim landowners who sold that property. And there was also some property that was allocated to them by the British. And these were not property taken away from the Muslims and given to the Jews. These are public lands. In every country, there is public land. For example, if you take India, the government has allotted a lot of land to the Sunni Waqf Board, the Islamic Waqf Board. So that's public land given to them. And then the British, as well as the Congress governments, allotted a lot of lands to the Christian church. In fact, in India, after the government of India, the Christian church is the largest landholding body in the country. So it's not even the Indian defense, it's the Indian Christian churches. They hold the largest land after the government of India. And because these were the public lands that were given to them by the government. Likewise, the British allocated some lands to the Jewish people. Those are public lands. So until 1948, until the formation of Israel, the Jewish people were not encroaching upon the Arab Muslim property in Palestine. They were legitimate settlers. And more than anything, Israel was their home. They have been there for 3,000 years. Okay, their ancestors have been there. And even in the case of the Ashkenazi Jews, so those were the Jews who had settled in Europe. Okay, they look European, but that's only the phenotype. But genetics tells a very interesting story. It points to a bottleneck around 1,000 years ago, okay, when a large number of Jewish men come from what is Palestine, Israel today, into Europe, and then they marry a very, very small number of white women, and then they beget these children. So what does it tell us? Why would all the men leave their native home and come to Europe and marry local European women, creating a genetic bottleneck? Because they were chased away by the Muslims. Okay? They would have faced an existential threat and they would have run away and they married. So even in the case of the Ashkenazi Jews, they're on the paternal side, they are completely Jewish. So in that sense, they all have legitimate claim to Israel because that's their home. That's always been their home for 3,000 years. In contrast, Islam came into existence only 1,300 years ago. So even by that yardstick, the Muslims are late entrants into Palestine vis-a-vis the Jews. So this is the first thing. So what happens in 1948? Now, Israel is formed, and then the United Nations comes up with a mandate. Okay, they want to create Muslim majority pockets and Jewish majority pockets in Palestine, so which would eventually become the two-state theory or the two-state solution. And when it happened, Israel was a newly formed state, and all the Arab countries which are surrounding Israel, they now attack Israel with only one objective: to annihilate Israel and to annihilate the Jews. And they thought it'll be an easy cakewalk for them, because Israel is a weak country, just formed, how can they fight back? But much to their chagrin, they find out that Israel actually fights back, and actually the Jews win the war. And when you win the war, and those people, the Palestinian Muslims inside, were ganging up with the invaders, the invading Arab Muslim countries. Okay, and then because for them it was a war between Muslim Ummah and then the Jews. Jews were the enemies of Islam, and hence they had ganged up. And now, when the war was won, a large number of them were now kicked out by Israel, which is what any country would do. If somebody were to join hands with the enemy and then try to destroy you, and you win the war, you will kick them out at the end of the day because they are internal enemies. They are the fifth column. So you are not going to keep them inside the country. That's how they end up in what we call West Bank, okay, part of Jordan. Okay, then it was part of Jordan because it was, Transjordanian territory. Okay, so when they go there, this is in 1948. Okay, a large number of Palestinian Muslim refugees make it to Jordan, and the king of Jordan grants them refuge. And not only refuge, he says, I'll give you equal citizenship right alongside Jordanians. And even though once you guys move in, you will be the majority. Okay, the native Jordanians will be the minority, but still, I'll give you citizenship right and equal privilege, everything. And they could have settled down because the 900,000 Jews who were ethnically cleansed and kicked out of their homes were not whining. Okay, they instead came to Israel, they settled down, and they became productive members of society. Okay, because you cannot change the past. You can only shape the present and build the future. That's what the Jews did. What did the Palestinian Muslims do? They were given refuge, they were given citizenship rights by the Jordanian king. And Jordan at the time was quite a powerful country, and it was quite modern, right, by the standards of the other Arab countries. And they could have done well. Instead, what do? They go and kill the king of Jordan. They assassinate him. Reason? He was too un-Islamic because he was friendly with the Brits and he was very modern, and that was not acceptable to them. So the next king kicks them out again. Okay, out. Okay, it was a mistake giving you guys refuge. Okay, giving you guys a home to live in, and you came and killed our own king, so you're out now. Okay, that's how they end up here in West Bank. So now every time we are noticing that none of the Arab countries wants to take the Palestinian Muslims in, right? So, they are all saying, okay, stay there and keep fighting the fight. But then nobody wants to take them. This is the reason. Okay, you bring them in, they kill the king who gave them refuge. Okay, then they go and start the Black September terror organization. Okay, that's why nobody wants to bring the Palestinian Muslims in. So 1948, this is what happens. They end up as refugees. And even after ending up as refugees, they could have still negotiated with Israel because Israel was not in a mood to fight wars all the time, because Israel is a small country. I have lived in Israel. I have worked in Israel. Okay, so I have a lot of familiarity with that. So Israel is a small country and they are not interested in fighting war. They are first and foremost interested in safeguarding the country and the land for the Jewish people. And they also have a sizable Muslim population. If you take Israel today, Inside Israel proper, there are 18%, one-fifth of the population are Muslims. Okay, so Israel has a vested interest not to alienate the Muslim people and then to rather reach settlement with them, to have peace with them. So, but the Palestinians did not want it. In 1967, once again, the different Arab countries led by Egypt, they all launched a surprise attack on Israel. Once again, the objective was the same, to annihilate the Jews and to annihilate Israel. Okay. So whenever they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, what they mean is it will be free of Jews. Okay. Kill the Jews, commit a genocide of Jews, get rid of them, and then take over the entire place. That is what that slogan means. And this slogan, or the motivation behind the slogan, was the same motivation that triggered the 1967 war. So all the Arab countries joined hands. They were all very powerful countries. Then they attacked Israel. Israel was initially taken aback. There was a setback. But once again, they fought back. They won. Okay. And this time when they won it royally. They went and captured territories from all the enemies who had attacked them, who had conspired and attacked them. And one such territory was the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza. Okay, so Gaza Strip is where most of the action is happening now, and Sinai Peninsula is further south of that in Egypt. They capture all of that, and afterwards there is negotiation. The Arab countries now realize it was a mistake taking on Israel, and we have now been beaten square and fair. So they come back and negotiate, and Israel says, "All right, I want peace, so I'll give you back Sinai Peninsula." They give it back to Egypt. Okay, and they only retain Gaza Strip, which is a small portion. Okay, and then all that place was anyway with Palestinian Muslims. Okay, so they were the Muslim-speaking people. Sorry, they were the Muslim people, and Egypt did not want them. Okay, Egypt said out. Okay, we don't want you Palestinians in Egypt. Okay, so some of them were getting kicked out from there. Some of them were getting kicked out from inside Israel. So they end up in Gaza Strip. Okay, so Gaza Strip is on the Mediterranean coast, and I have been there. It's a beautiful place. It's a stunningly beautiful place. Any sane people would have turned that into a Mediterranean resort. Okay, where tourism would be thriving. Okay, that's what the Italians have done. That's what the Greeks have done. That's what even the Turks have done. No, not the Palestinians. Okay, they won't calm down. They won't build an economy. And even though people look at Gaza, okay, Gaza city, do you see all those high-rise buildings? You see beautiful buildings there, right? So you see roads, well laid out cities, planned city. Who built all of those things? Israel and Western countries. It's not the Palestinians who built that. Okay, so in fact, only now in India we are getting those kind of apartments, and those guys had it for last 20 years. Okay, no, but Palestinians won't calm down. Palestinians won't build a future for themselves. They won't live in the present. Okay, they were consumed by a death wish, by an obsession to get rid of Israel at every stage. Okay, so 1967 is when some of them get confined either to West Bank or to Gaza. Okay, and then Golan Heights is another place where part of the Israel gives back to Arab countries, part of it retains. That's what happens when you fight a war and you win the war. Then the winner gets to decide. Okay, then you cannot start a war, and you cannot start the war with the objective of annihilating the Jews and the Jews and Israel, and then you lose the war and you say, "Oh, let's pretend nothing happened, give it all back." I mean, it doesn't work that way. Okay, so but Israel still gave a lot of territory back to these guys, only with the sole hope of finding peace. Okay, now at least calm down. Okay, let's have peace. Okay, we are here. We are not going anywhere. This is Israel. This is for Jewish people. Don't attack us anymore. No, they won't calm down. Okay, let's fast forward. Come to October 7th. When Hamas launched an attack, this attack was launched on top of a mandate. What is that mandate? 15 years back, 16 years back, when they ran for election, and in fact, this mandate is same as what they published in 1988. Okay, except that for the elections, they shortened it. That's all. Okay, so let me first say what was there in the 1988 mandate, and then the pre version of that was when they ran for election 16 years ago. So in their mandate, Hamas says the goal, Article 7 of the Hamas mandate. Okay, go and look up for that. They say our goal is to annihilate the Jews and annihilate Israel. And what do they quote as their authority? They quote a hadith spoken by Prophet Muhammad, where Muhammad says, the day of reckoning or the day of judgment, the day of reckoning will not come until all the Jews have been killed by Muslims. On the day of reckoning, some Jews will be hiding behind trees and rocks. The trees and rocks will call out, here is the Jew hiding behind me. Oh, Muslim, come get him. So they published this as part of their manifesto, Article 7. And then the Palestinian people of Gaza, the Muslims of Gaza, they overwhelmingly vote the Hamas to power. So there are no innocent people here. So what is motivating here? is an Islamic religiously motivated hatred of Jews, which the Hamas advertises as their election manifesto, which resonates very well with the Palestinian Muslim people, and then they vote Hamas to power. And the reason it resonated is it has always resonated. In 1948, they want to annihilate the Jews. And in 1967, they wanted to annihilate the Jews. And when Hamas came to power, they wanted to annihilate the Jews. It's always been a constant. And not only that, while the Second World War was happening, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who was the biggest Muslim leader of the time, he had a massive following across, not only in Palestine, Jerusalem is in Palestine, but across the entire Arab Muslim world. He had a massive following. He visits Adolf Hitler. He meets him. And then he proposes to him the final solution. Until that time, Hitler had not thought of the final solution. His initial plan was to kick all the Jews out of Germany and send them to Madagascar. But it's the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem who goes and proposes, why bother sending them to Madagascar and all these places? Instead, kill them all. Okay. And then he volunteers, and Hitler is obviously thrilled. He says, that's a fantastic idea. Let me go and enforce that. And then the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem also offers the services of Muslims. And Hitler says, no, thank you. We can take care of the Jews ourselves. But some of them have already fled to Palestine, and some of them are in the process of doing so. So you guys take care of them. Okay. So even the final solution was proposed by the Muslims. Once again, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem proposed it because he's like the Catholics, right? He's a very influential person. He proposed it because that's what Islamic textbooks teach. Okay, Islamic scriptures teach. That's what the Quran teaches. That's what Hadiths teach. All of them portray the Jew as the enemy of Muslims. And then when you look at Surah 8, Surah 5, Surah 4. Okay, what are the surahs? Yeah, Surah 8, not 5. I'm sorry. Surah 8, Surah 9, and Surah 4. All of these things say the following. Number one, the infidels, the kafirs, are the enemies of Muslims. And then it's the religious duty of the Muslim to fight the kafirs. And whichever Muslim would not fight the infidels, he will earn the wrath of Allah. Okay, Allah will be displeased with that person. And Allah will replace that person with somebody else. What does that mean? Which means a Muslim who refuses to fight the infidels will not go to Islamic heaven. Allah will replace him with somebody else. Okay. Then Allah says, on the other hand, those who fight the infidels, whether you win or you die, you will be richly rewarded in heaven. So the entire religion of Islam, the entire ideology here is a morbid ideology. It's a death cult. Okay. Because that's why, recently there is this Muslim Dawa guy and a propagandist and one of those rabble-rousers. His name is Muhammad Hijab. He lives in England, right? And he's apparently educated at Oxford, but that's again proof. Education does not cure fundamentalism, okay, and fanaticism. So he was out on the streets during this, pro-Palestinian protests, and he was saying, we are not afraid of death because for Muslims, life begins at death. Okay, so in every other religion, if you take Hinduism, for example, we celebrate life. Okay, you have 4 ashramas in life. Brahmacharya, when you go learn, acquire all the life skills. Then there's Grahastha ashrama, so you enjoy everything. Then Vanaprastha, then Sannyasa, where you seek self-realization. Or you take the various Purusharthas of life. They're all focused on the world here. Okay, Dharma, okay, how to lead a harmonious life here. Okay, Artha, how do you earn wealth, knowledge, everything, so that your life here is good. Okay, then Kama is your own indulgence in sexual pleasures in this world, in this life. Okay, then only comes Moksha. Okay, it's the final stage. And whereas Islam, no, none of those things. Okay, you go and blow yourself up, you go and kill the infidel. Okay, then you will go to heaven where you will get 72 virgins. Okay, and this is what has been motivating a large number of Muslims. And that's why when you even look at all the protests that are happening around the world, okay, take for example, the various Indian Muslims who are protesting, and some leftists are joining hands with them. Okay, and this is something very strange because hundreds of thousands of Kashmiri Hindus were ethnically cleansed, and there was a genocide, and they were kicked out. And then none of these Indian Muslims or none of these Indian leftists protested. They could have just come out and said, look, we express solidarity with the Kashmiri Hindus. This is against Islam, even though it is not. They could have at least pretended this is against Islam. So, please don't do that. We will stand by the victims. No, they never did that. Okay. They always identify with the Islamic Ummah, okay, from around the world. Okay. So that's Darul Islam for them. And then they go out and protest. Now, even then, do they really care for the well-being of Muslims around the world or even Palestinian Muslims? The answer is no. Why? For example, take Yemen. Yemen is the Muslim country. Okay, it's in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula. And in the last 9 years, 800,000 Yemenis people have died of starvation. Okay, 800,000 people in the last 9 years died of starvation in Yemen. Okay, did you find a single protest, single march anywhere in the world by any Muslim saying, "Oh my God, this is terrible. This is against the Islamic principle of charity, everything, and so many people should not be dying. So let's go and save them." Okay, and appeal to the governments and UN and everyone, say, "Hey, can you send some relief to them?" And say, no, nobody did that because they don't care about how many Muslims are dying. Because like Muhammad's hijab, that propagandist said, for Muslims, life begins at death. Okay, it's death they celebrate. They want more and more people to die so that they can prepare themselves for jihad and and all of these things. Okay, so that is the fundamental reason. And second, even look at what is happening in Gaza when the fighting started. Okay, when Israel started responding, Prime Minister Netanyahu, he said he blockaded the entire Gaza, and then he said, "I will not lift the blockade until the hostages are returned safely." Okay, all the protesting Muslims from around the world, whether they are from India or UK or Germany or USA, all they had to do was to say, stand with one placard that says, "Return the hostages." Okay, put pressure on Hamas, because you're not just putting pressure on Hamas, you're putting pressure on its sponsors, which are Qatar, Iran, and Turkey. Those are three countries which are sponsoring Hamas. Now, all those three countries have to survive in this world. Okay, Qatar is dependent on the United States. Otherwise, US can block all of their money overnight. Okay, same the case with Iran. Okay, if US decides to block the funding for Iran, Iran will go bankrupt overnight. Okay, same for Turkey. Turkey is part of overall EU. Okay, and then they depend on the rest of the European countries for their own economy. And if the rest of the Muslims protesting on the streets had just stood up and said, "Okay, return the hostages safely now." Okay, these countries, Qatar, Turkey, and Iran would have had no option than to put pressure on Hamas to return the hostages. And what would it have meant? It would have meant that Netanyahu would have lifted the blockade and at least essentials would have reached the Gazan people. But nobody did that. Okay. Not one person demanded, not one Muslim protester from anywhere in the world demanded, return the hostages, because their interest is not ending the war, okay, not saving the people of Gaza, but to prolong the war and to keep the Palestinian issue alive so that they can wage jihad against Jews and the Kafirs in general. Second demand, Netanyahu has also said, the Palestinian people are not my enemies. They are not our enemy. Instead, the Hamas is our enemy and we want to completely destroy Hamas. So which means all of those folks protesting around the world had to only put up a second demand. Stand with a placard saying, "Hamas, on your knees, surrender before IDF, Israeli Defense Forces." That's it. Okay. So will Hamas obey? No, I don't think so. Okay. But then you guys are protesting against Netanyahu and against Joe Biden and against Narendra Modi. Are they going to, get swayed by your protest? No. But the reason you are protesting is you want to influence public opinion, and then you want the government to understand that a large number of you are not happy with the government's decision, and hence they should pay heed to you. That's why you are protesting on the street. Same applies here. When you say Hamas surrender, Hamas on its own may not want to surrender. Okay. However, my apologies. Yeah. Oh, sorry. For a second, the screen went off. Okay. So Hamas may not want to surrender on its own, but now with the US putting, tightening the screws on Iran, Qatar, and Turkey, okay, there will be immense pressure on Hamas. Okay. At least to cease fire and at least to make some token surrender, and all of these things might happen. Okay. But the point I want to make is none of these protesting Muslims and their leftist bedfellows have even put up this demand. Okay. If at all anything, they are all pro-Hamas. BLM, the Black Lives Movement, for example, published a cartoon of somebody in the hang glider. Okay, the same thing that Hamas terrorists flew. Okay, and then Free Palestine. So they are identifying with that. Okay, they are identifying with Hamas. And everywhere, the Muslim protesters are chanting, "Death to the Jews, gas the Jews." Okay, and then yesterday in London, they were chanting, "Haybar, Haybar, remember Jews." Okay, because Haybar was an incident from the time of Muhammad, where it's a small settlement of Jewish people. Muhammad and his army, if at all I call it an army, it was more of jihadis. They surround that. They ask the Jews to submit, surrender, and convert to Islam. The Jews say no, okay, and they say we are happy with our religion, we are not interested in converting. And then Muhammad wages war, kills them. Okay, 800 or 900 of those Jewish people or men are slaughtered in cold blood, and then their women are taken captive. So the Muslims were chanting yesterday in London, okay, Khaybar, Khaybar, remember Jews. Okay, meaning we'll do the same thing to you now. What Muhammad did to the Jews of Khaybar, we will do to you today. Okay, and everywhere, this is what they are chanting. They are chanting, death to Jews, gas the Jews, okay, and all of these things. All of these things are not motivated by any concern for the Palestinian people or the people of Gaza or any of those things. Like the various examples I quoted, the Muslim protesters from around the world are not interested in the well-being of other Muslims. They rather want them to die. They want more and more Palestinians to die so that they can keep alive their hatred of Jews. Because this hatred comes directly from Islam, directly from the conduct of Muhammad, directly from the Quran and then the Hadiths. So long as they are believing Muslims, they have to hate the Jews. That's the tragic predicament they are in, and that's what they're enacting out on the streets. Now, a lot of times people talk about what should be the proportionate response of Israel. Okay, so people will argue, hey, yes, some people will consider, yes, what Hamas did was wrong. They went and killed 4,000 Israeli civilians, so Israel has the right to retaliate. But, it should be proportionate. You come back and you kill 2,000, 3,000, but stop with it. Don't go on bombarding Gaza. Okay, first of all, Israel is not exacting revenge to settle scores. Okay, and I cannot walk into somebody's home, butcher 4 of them, and come back and say, hey, now when you get even, just kill 4 people. Okay, then we are all even, and then let's stop with it. No, things don't work that way. Okay, a proportionate response has to be measured against a benchmark. And what's the benchmark? What is the response that will kill the least number of civilians? Okay, but it will deter Hamas in the future or any jihadi organization in the future. And we have one such benchmark in the 21st century. Actually, we have 2. Okay, let me mention both. Okay, one from the US and one from India. Okay. In the United States, 9/11 happened, 2001. So 3,000 Americans were killed in that attack by Al-Qaeda. So America retaliated. Of course, America retaliated against Iraq. That's a different story. Okay, so they went off Iraq, and according to the Iraqi body count, which is the American official statistic, 160,000 Iraqis were killed in retaliation. Okay, but whether we like it or not, that was a very effective response. Okay, because the jihadis have not dared to attack the US in any major way since then. Okay, so the first objective of retaliation has to be to deter future jihadi terror, and America has done a fabulous job of doing that. So let's use America as the benchmark. Then I'll come back to another example too, but then I'll come to that in a minute. So America has, when you adjust against the population, the 1,400 who died in Israel, it would have been equivalent of 45,000 dead on 9/11 in US. Because at the time 9/11 happened, America had a population of, I think, 265 or 270 million. Israel today has a population of just 9 million. Okay, so it's not the number comparison. So 3,000 in America, 1,400 in Jewish casualty would have been 45,000 when you translate it to the 9/11 scale. Okay, so for 3,000 American casualty, America retaliated by killing 160,000 Iraqis. So apply the same number. Now for 45,000 casualty, the proportionate response would have been 2.4 million. Okay, but here's the problem. Okay, first of all, whoever is demanding proportionate response should do the basic math and should realize how grotesque it is, because they are asking for Israel to go and annihilate 2.4 million Gazans. Okay, but the problem is there are only 2.3 million Gazans around there. There's still a shortfall of 100,000. Where are they going to bring it from? From West Bank? So that's why I consider this proportional, response argument not only preposterous, but also lacking in scruples, okay, and grotesque to the core. Instead, Israel's response should be to respond in such a way that they don't get back to Israel for a long time to come. So for that, we have an example from India too. So the Godhra massacre. So 59 women and children in a coach were set ablaze and burnt to death alive by Muslims. Okay, there was a Muslim mob which ganged up at Signal Falia and stopped the train and then burnt them alive to death. And of course, this resulted in a lot of anger in Gujarat across society, and Hindus retaliated. And there were a lot of riots on the street. They went on for a day or two before the army was brought in and quelled. In the process, I think something like 675 Muslims and 250 or 260 Hindus got killed in the entire riots. Okay, that's a tragedy, because I think a single civilian death is a tragedy. But the burning of 59 women and children was even a bigger tragedy. Okay, because if the tragedy had not happened, the riots would not have happened. Okay, we cannot, start something. We cannot start a fire and then we cannot say now, let this fire not burn my house. Okay, so you start a fire, then you should know it's going to have consequences. But when the Hindus responded by rioting, okay, in Gujarat, we have not had another jihadi attack since then. Okay, because those jihadis understand, no, the Gujarati Hindus are not going to be pushover. They are not going to take it lying down. If we go and kill 59 of their people, they are going to retaliate by killing 10 times more. Okay, I'm not saying it's ideal, but unfortunately, like Ayurveda says, poison is the cure for poison. Okay, to some extent, it's inevitable. That's what applies in war too. When you come to war, what is Israel's objective? When you look at Gaza, the Hamas gets $1 billion a year. That's their exchequer. Okay, they could have done a lot with that. Okay, it's a small country. Okay, it's only 2.2 million, 2.3 million people. No, they use that money to build tunnels. Okay, they have built 300 miles of tunnels. Okay, by some estimate, it's only 300 kilometers. Nobody knows the exact extent. But consider the entire strip is only about, the entire city is only about 19 square kilometers, okay, in space, in area. And they've got 300 kilometers of tunnels under that. Okay, some of these tunnels are in multiple levels. So that's where they stockpile arms, missiles, everything. They'll bring it out, they'll fire the missiles, then they will go back into that. So that Israel cannot strike back without hitting the buildings. And then they have also built offensive tunnels closer to Israel, from where they can launch attack on Israel. Okay? So now, if Israel were to send their army to fight hand-to-hand combat with the Hamas, then a lot of Israeli soldiers will die. And that's not fair. Okay. To give an example, General Petraeus talks about what happened in Mosul. Okay, when the US-led coalition was fighting ISIS in Mosul. And Mosul did not have any underground tunnels. And still, it took 9 months of fight against ISIS. ISIS had only 10,000 terrorists. 9 months of fight and 4,500 soldiers lost their lives. Okay. Now, fighting in Gaza would be many times worse than that because of underground tunnels and because it's also a very tightly packed urban center. So if the Israelis were to send in their soldiers right away, a lot of soldiers will die. And if the war continues for 9 months, 10 months, 18 months, which it will, okay, then Israeli economy will be ruined, because if you notice, in the first 1 week after October 7th attacks, Israel dipped into $30 billion of reserves to fight the war. So you can imagine if this continues for a year, Israel will be ruined economically. Of course, America will come to its rescue, but then still, Israel will be in a very weakened position. Israel cannot afford that. So what has Israel got to do? Israel has to make sure that the buildings are flattened, okay, because without flattening the building, you cannot get to the tunnels, okay. And then to flatten the building, what they have done, they have given warning. They sent SMS message to the residents of Gaza. They made phone calls. They dropped flyers from air all over Gaza, telling them, vacate. We are going to bomb this place, vacate. Then they fired warning shots. Then finally they launched missile. Think of one country in the world which has done this during wartime. Only Israel has done it. All the others, they will not sacrifice the surprise element. They'll just go and bomb. Okay, especially because these Gazans elected a terrorist organization as the government. So they are guilty. And then when October 7th happened, when the Hamas terrorists came back, you saw the videos. The Gazans accorded them heroes welcome. Okay, they were all celebrating. Okay, and everywhere around the world, Muslims are celebrating. In New York, in Times Square, on day one, the casualty was 700 Jews. Okay, so in Times Square, large numbers of Muslims. So the Jews, a small number of Jews had gathered. They were singing the national anthem, and then they were praying for the Jewish victims of this jihad attack. And a large number of Muslims converged on scene in Times Square in New York. And then they were all chanting 700, okay, 700, and making this gesture, okay. So they are celebrating it, okay, around the world, okay. So the Gazans are celebrating, the Muslims everywhere are celebrating, because for them, Jews are enemies to be anyway annihilated. That's what their religion teaches. That's what Muhammad has taught them. That's what Hamas manifesto says. That's what their hadith says. So they are not going to think differently. And but still, despite having such a hostile enemy, what Israel did was to give them enough warning. So you guys get out, okay? And then when you get out, we can minimize loss to civilian lives, okay? So that's the best any country that is prosecuting war can do, okay? And there are two more reasons why Israel would want to do that, okay? When the Hamas needs human shield, okay? Otherwise, Hamas will be finished in no time. So when the people start moving out, okay, south of Wadi Gaza, which they can perfectly well do, okay, it'll only take them 2 hours by foot, 20 minutes by car. That's it. Okay, if you want to save your life, you'll walk 2 hours. Okay, what's the big deal? So, and then when they go there, what Hamas will try to do is they will try to slip some of the hostages along with them. Okay, otherwise, the hostages and Hamas, if they're isolated in the tunnels, Hamas will be taken apart by Israel. Okay, so they would try to send some of them so that they go further south, and Israel now has got all the satellites and all the drones, everything trained on every inch of Gazan territory. So if they are moving, it will be still difficult to identify because they can put the hostages under burqa and march them. But they also have informants. They will try to activate every one of them. They can identify, look, here is where the hostages are. So when Sayeret Matkal, which is their special forces, when they launch their commando operations, they will at least know precise location from where to rescue their hostages. Okay, Israel will do everything they could to rescue them. And third one, you have to flatten the buildings before you can get to the tunnels. And even if you are going to, fire weapons inside the tunnel, which is very difficult. And but flattening the city means now they can fight the tunnels from here. They don't have to send the forces on the ground. Okay, so those are the reasons Israel is doing it, and Israel is doing something perfectly civilized, which nobody else has done. Okay, nobody else gives so many warnings, and if despite all of these things, the Gazans are not taking advantage of Israeli generosity, they've got only themselves to blame. And always one statistic is brought up. Oh, half of the population in Gaza is children. Okay, what did they do? Okay, you can blame the adults for electing Hamas, for celebrating the Hamas butchery of Jewish people and all these things. But what did the children do? Fair question. Okay, by the same yardstick, what did the Jewish children do? They did nothing wrong. Okay, but you went and killed them. Okay, and then you burnt them alive. Okay, in one case, they cut open a pregnant woman's belly, pulled the child out, cut off the fingers of the child, then beheaded the child, and then burnt the child. Okay, in another case, they tied the mom and her infant back to back, burnt her alive. Okay, and then Israel then published all the evidence, not only of the burnt remains, but also of the CT scans of the burnt image, of the burnt remains. So I can also argue back, what did the Israeli children do? What did they do to deserve this? Okay, but the best response for this was given by Golda Meir. Golda Meir was the Prime Minister of Israel in the early 70s. So she was asked, when will peace come? When will peace come to Israel-Palestine? She replied, when Arab Muslims love their children more than they hate ours, peace will come. So in any society, one can always invoke this clever argument, but what about the children? Okay, but children do not exist in a void. If adults who are there to take care of the children, they make all the terrible decisions, you elect a terrorist organization as your government, and then you celebrate them going out and slaughtering the Jewish women, children, everyone, burning them alive, chopping off their head and all these things. And then when the government of Israel, when the state of Israel retaliates, then you cannot invoke the children. You should have thought about the children all along. Now also it's not too late. Get the hell out of Gaza City. Your children will be safe. Okay. And then all along you were celebrating, you elected Hamas. Now you tell Hamas, go and surrender on your knees in front of before IDF. Have they ever done it? No, not even one of them. Okay. So this is about the civilian deaths. Now comes the actual questions. Okay, how will this all end? Okay. This is not a political problem. The Palestinian problem is a religious problem. And it's not the religion of Jews. It's not Judaism that started the problem. Judaism doesn't care about Islam because it does not know about Islam. Islam came much later than Judaism. So Jewish scriptures, Jewish religion, they don't know anything about Islam. But Islam is obsessed with the Jewish people and the Kafirs. Okay. And then it calls for the complete annihilation of Jews. And Islam core beliefs on the day of reckoning, the day of judgment, requires a slaughter of Jews by the Muslims. And those were spoken by Muhammad themselves. And Muslims have been indoctrinated from childhood into believing these are all revelations from Allah and these are the words that ought to be followed. So the fundamental problem is even if you create a two-state solution, the problem will not end. And how do we know? Because between 2014 and 2020, 6 surveys were conducted in West Bank and Gaza among the Palestinians. They were asked if a two-state solution is in place, will it be peace after that? They said no. Okay. Consistently on all the 6 surveys, as many as 60% of the population replied no. And then they said, even if we get that, we'll still fight for the destruction of Israel. So from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free of Muslims, free of Jews. That's what they want. So even if you give them everything, okay, even if you give them 99% of Israel and just leave 1% of the Jewish people, they won't stop there because their motivation is religious. It comes from Islam. Okay. So long as Islam is there, this problem will continue. Okay. So why should Israel concede territory? Instead, Israel will be better off, okay, confining the Gazans to a small refugee camp to the southern tip of Gaza, or even kicking them out to other Muslim countries, okay, and then making sure that place is all settled by Jews and the place is fully armed and defended, so that Israel can deal with any eventual aggression by foreign powers in the future. Okay? But I think this is not only a problem that is affecting Israel. So look at what the Muslim protesters and some of their leftist bedfellows have done around the world, from Australia to US, from Canada to India. From everywhere, what they have done is they have taken to the streets. So, for example, 100,000 Muslims, they converged on Downing Street, the residence of the Prime Minister of UK, okay, and did namaz there. What is it? Straight out intimidation, right? Saying that we can mobilize 100,000 people and we can shut the city down. We'll do namaz on the street, okay? And it's not namaz, okay? It's not prayer, okay? It's not prayer like in Hinduism or Judaism or any other Buddhism or anything, right? This is intimidation. What they are saying is, we can now get up and then march on your house. Okay, we can come and, swoop down on the Prime Minister of UK. Okay, that's the message they are getting across to everyone. Okay, and then they are telling, what are you going to do? Are you going to shoot us? So the problem is now much deeper. Now, I think it's not only, I think Israel prosecuting the war until Israel feels completely safe and until the Israelis are convinced that justice has been meted out, that war should continue. Okay, and that, in my opinion, that war should only end when the Palestinian threat has been completely neutralized, meaning everybody should get the message, Palestine is over. You are not getting Palestine anymore. Okay, because Israel time and again made the concession. Remember that. Okay, so Saudi Arabia intervened. Okay, so like for example, in 2000, okay, there was a complete plan. So prior to that, there was the Abrahamic Accord. There was the Abraham Accord. There was Oslo Accord, and then 2000, America, Israel, and everyone, Saudi Arabia, they were willing to invest money to create a small Palestinian state. They could have done it. Gaza was a separate country in its own right. Okay, they had 15, 16 years of time to just build that country and be normal. No, they didn't do that. They won't do that because their motivation comes from Islam. And the motivation of the protesters, whether they are the leftists or the Muslims, again comes from Islam. Okay, Islam is viciously anti-Semitic, viciously Jew-hating. So they come up with it. So the bigger question for the Western world is, what are you going to do about this? Okay, so, you made the big mistake of bringing in so many Muslims as quote within quote refugees. Okay, and this was despite warning from very good Muslim academics themselves. One such person is Professor Salim Mansour. Okay, Salim Mansour is a retired professor of political science from the University of Western Ontario. Okay, in 2012, he is a Muslim himself. He goes to the Canadian House of Commons and then he gave a speech, he gave a testimony. He said, please close the borders to Muslim immigrants. And the reason he said that was, Muslims are at best illiberal and at worst totally smitten by Sharia and all those rubbish. Okay, whereas Canada is a liberal country, it's a Western country where we cherish liberty, we cherish freedom, and then the more of Muslims we bring in, they will threaten the very fabric of our society. That's exactly what's happening now. In all the Western societies, it's happening. So now comes the question, the West has been at the forefront of sanitizing Islam, portraying it as a religion of peace, which it is not. It's a religion of submission. Islam means submission, and submit to the will of Allah and you commit terror acts. That's what it teaches. Okay, and it's a religious duty for you to go and commit such acts against non-believers. So now comes the question, what are you going to do with this? I think the sanest solution one can come up with is excise freedom of speech, which is still available in the West, and then say enough is enough. Islam does not belong in civilized world, in civilized societies. Okay, so we will go about eradicating Islam just like we went about eradicating Nazism. Okay, and then we will convert Muslims into ex-Muslims. What they become is up to them. Okay, whether they want to just become rationalists, they want to become Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, whatever it is, it's up to them. But at the minimum, the West has to realize now that Islam and Muslims don't belong in civilized society, but ex-Muslims do. That's why I want to make it a very clear distinction. Okay, I've got nothing against the people per se. Yeah, so long as the day they are cured of Islam, they stop being Muslims, I have nothing to fear in. And a country like India has to now act because you have constitutional provisions that curtail free speech. You cannot even, criticize Islam factually. Okay, forget ridiculing it or mocking Islam or anything, and you can go to jail for nothing. Okay, because you offended somebody's religious sensibility. But what about the religious sensibilities of Hindus? What is the Islamic Shahada? Ya ilahi illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Okay, so there is no God but Allah. That means they are rejecting all the other Hindu divinities. Okay, Rama, Shiva, Parvati, Lakshmi, Muruga, name every one of our divinities, Saraswati, everyone, they are rejecting all of them as false. There is no God but Allah. Okay, and Muhammad is his final prophet. Okay, meaning all the Hindu sages, okay, the hundreds and hundreds of them we had, Adi Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Swami Vivekananda, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Narayana Guru, you name hundreds of them, all of those are completely rejected as bogus by Islam. And this is what every Muslim chants every single day. Should I get offended? Offense can go both ways. Okay. Then if you had to apply those Indian laws of offense uniformly, then Islam should be completely banned because they are intolerant and they are offending our sensibilities. But I would say I'm not for any of those bans. I want to, if you are anyway offending my sensibility, I want to have the same freedom to offend your sensibility so that I can critique your religion and I can wean you out of Islam and do Garvapsi. So this is something we Hindus in India have to demand. We can only get it when we have a Hindu government in power.
And to begin my question, I'll bring you back to the point from where you started, the genesis of hatred against Jews. So, what has been the reason? I mean, it has not only been limited to Islam induced hatred, but you would have found it in other religions also. That is the reason why Albert Hitler also started his war against Jews. So, what would have been the reason why Jews in specific have been targeted since beginning?
So the reason for that is both Christianity and Islam, both of them are very anti-Semitic. I'll just give a few stats here. There is a Lutheran theologian by the name Norman Beck. Okay? Norman Beck wrote a very influential essay. The title of the essay is Removing the Anti-Jewish Polemics from Our Lectionaries. Okay? So he summarizes 451 verses in the New Testament that are spewing hatred on Jews. And many of those verses are spoken by Jesus himself. So when Hitler comes to power and he calls Jews, the devil is the father of Jews. Those are the words spoken by Jesus. Hitler was simply repeating what Jesus spoke. Okay? So Christianity is a very anti-Semitic religion. Okay, hates Jews. And Islam does the same thing. Islam hates Jews. And why? The reason for that is both of these religions are replacement theologies. Okay, what does it mean? They both depend on Judaism, okay, for their own legitimacy. Okay, so for Christianity, Jesus is the prophesied Messiah of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. Okay, which of course Jews don't accept. Okay, so if they're accepted, then Christianity would have been the new Judaism. Okay, but since they did not accept, now they become the villains. Okay, so because now they are the constant reminder that, oh, you know what, your Messiah is not legit, your Messiah is not the one prophesied by our scriptures. Same thing with Islam. Okay, Islam is also dependent on Old Testament, okay, because the entire claim is we both are, Ishmael and, both of us are, the sons of Abraham, okay, but we are cousins, but one of you went wrong. And the entire Islamic theology is your scripture has been corrupted and the Quran preserves the original version. That's why they came up with ridiculous stories like Abraham building the first mosque in Mecca. Okay, so, well, which is such an absurdity, it doesn't even require a rebuttal. Okay, so because Judaism had nothing to do with Arabia. Okay, Judaism was confined to Jerusalem, Palestine, Judea, and all that. Okay, Arabia is hundreds of kilometers further to the east and south. But they both depend on Judaism, okay? And then since they appeal to Judaism for legitimizing their own religion, okay, any opposition from Jews has to be now suppressed, okay? And Jews obviously would oppose. So they would say, no, you are not the Messiah and you are not my prophet, okay? They rejected that. And hence, they both have to hate the Jews. That's why now the Jews have to become the sacrificial victims of both Christianity and Islam. And in the case of Islam, in the case of Christianity, Western societies, Europe in particular, became less Christian. Okay, Christianity got defanged. Okay, and society became more modernized. As a result of that, Christian anti-Semitism has got significantly weakened. Not that anything changed in Christianity. Christianity has got all of those things, but it is like an old wine. But since it was not properly corked, it turned into vinegar. That's it. It's no longer fit for consumption. Okay, in the Christian world. But in Islam, it has been nicely bottled. Okay, it has been propagated from one generation to another. Parents raise their children, teaching them all this hatred of Jews. And that's what every ex-Muslim comes out and tells, right? Every one of them tells, no, we were taught hatred of Jews by our parents. Then in the madrasa, that's getting reinforced. They go to school, media gets reinforced. That's the reason.
So my second question would be about the hospital incident which happened in Gaza and that counter acted on the Hamas. So can you just briefly elaborate for the
Sure. Yeah. So yesterday or day before yesterday, Israel published data. Okay. Actually, there are multiple data. Number one, okay, let me rewind a little bit. Okay. Right after the attack, the day after the attack, Israel published two very important pieces of evidence, okay, which was also shared with the US, and US also concurred in that. Okay, now, first evidence was they showed that the shrapnels, okay, were not from Israel at all. And then if Israel had launched a missile, it would have created a crater, okay, which it did not, okay. And then the second piece of evidence they brought out was a recorded conversation between two Hamas operatives, okay. And one of them was pointing out, one of them was saying, Ya Allah, why did that missile find the hospital of all places? Could it not have found any other place? Okay. And the other guy says, yes, it was fired from the parking lot and the cemetery closer to that. And then by mistake, it landed here. It was fired by Islamic Jihad, which is another terror group associated with Hamas. And they fired the rocket. And by mistake, the rocket landed in the parking lot of the hospital. Now, initially the leftist media thought that, my God, now this is Israel is the culprit. So they claimed that the hospital had got demolished. But 24 hours later, when the proof came out and Hamas was shown to be the victims, Hamas was shown to be the actual culprits and not Israel, then what happened was the hospital came back. Okay. So that's why Imtiaz Mahmood, who's an ex-Muslim and a rationalist living in UK, he asked a question. We are told that Jesus resurrected 3 days after death, and this hospital seems to have resurrected completely. Okay, yesterday you guys said it was bombed out by the Israelis, but now I see the full hospital standing there. Okay, so now yesterday Israel released another. So day before yesterday, Israel released another video conversation. Telephonic conversation among the Hamas operatives, and they are pointing out where all they have a stockpile of weapons, ammunition. So they have stored it right under the hospital. That's the Hamas headquarters. So what I would say is Israel would be perfectly justified targeting the hospital after giving a warning, okay, so that the patients can get out if at all they can, okay, and then simply launching a daisy cutter to take out the entire hospital, the tunnels, everything, because that's where the ammunition are stored. That's where Hamas headquarters is. But Israel has not done it. Okay, Israel is being way too civilized while prosecuting a war. Okay, and so the Hamas and the leftist media unleashed a false propaganda. And even when it was proven false, they have not retracted any of that. Okay, they have simply kept quiet and they have moved on to the next allegation. That's it.
So this brings me to my third question, which is about the principle of proportionality, which you mentioned during your talk. So where does international law stands when it comes to the revenge in this particular case?
I know intentional targeting of civilians is not allowed. Okay, and use of certain chemicals like white phosphorus on civilians is not allowed. Okay, and targeting civilian infrastructure on purpose. Okay, like schools, water bodies, and all these things. That's not allowed. And Israel is not doing any of those things. Okay, we have to make a distinction between collateral damage and intentional targeting. Okay, so for example, when 9/11 happened, that was intentional target. Okay, by that Al Qaeda terrorists, they targeted the building, knowing well that it will result in the casualty of large number of Americans. But when America retaliated, it was not intentional targeting. They were going after enemy targets, and in the process, a lot of civilians would have died too. Okay? Now, in the case of Israel, like I mentioned, Israel has given warning. Okay, who sends SMS messages and calls from a call center saying, "Hey, vacate. We are going to bomb your building." Okay, then drops pamphlets and then fires warning shots. At least now get the hell out of here. Okay, and then they do that. So I think after this, Israel is not at all culpable. Okay, nobody can blame Israel. Okay, because nobody else. Just showing one other country. Even the US did not do that. Did America go and drop pamphlets on Iraq or Afghanistan before saying we are going to drop a bomb? No, they just dropped the bombs and they went off. That's it. Okay, Israel has been way too civilized in prosecuting war. Okay, so I think I would want them to be less civilized, because by doing this, what they are allowing is, so they have given enough warning. Okay, by now all the Gazans should have moved south of Wadi Gaza as ordered by Prime Minister Netanyahu. Okay, if they are not done it until now, it's they who have to blame. And of course, some of them will say, "Oh, Hamas is not letting us to go." Okay, break through the cordon, because the Israeli bombs are coming. Okay, that will definitely kill you. Okay, now you want to obey the Hamas or disobey the Hamas and move to safety, do that. And let's see whether Hamas is really going to shoot you. And if they shoot you, then the rest of the world, at least then the Muslims and leftists who are protesting against Israel should then start protesting against Hamas. Okay, let's see whether they can shoot 2 million Gazans. Okay, move. That's it. Okay, Israel has done everything. Now I think Israel's only goal should be rescue as many of the hostages as humanly possible. But I don't think they will even rescue 5% of the hostages. Okay, because it's impossible. The situation is such that, okay, because the hostages are distributed and held in tunnels and everything, you cannot. Okay, so but Israel will do its best to bring every one of them back. But the second objective for them should be to minimize the casualty of Israeli soldiers. Okay, under no circumstance should a soldier's life be sacrificed wantonly. So that means if you have to wage the war from the sky, do it until all of Gaza is totally flattened.
Sir, in the place of calling spade a spade, even in India today, you'll find two school of thoughts channeling out on this particular issue. And majority of the young population, you'll find them on social media campaigning in the favor of Palestine for whatsoever reason, or for the logic of secularism, which we have been carrying with ourselves as a baggage since our independence. So I can clearly see that after Jews, it's us only who would be the biggest enemy of Islam and Christianity as well. So what would be your message for the present generation and the generation to come? How should we prepare ourselves?
The choice they have in front of them is whether they want to be useful idiots of the jihadis or they want to be useful members of society. They cannot be both. Okay, so like everything explained here, from 1878 onwards, Jews settled in Israel legitimately. The Palestinian Muslims are the usurpers, okay, because the rest of the Arab Muslim world stole the Jewish property, kicked them out. And then on top of that, the Arab Muslims tried to settle down in Palestine. Okay, so first of all, if at all we are sympathizing somebody, we should sympathize with Israel. But even more importantly, Israel has always been on India's side. 1962 war, nobody was helping India, Israel did. 71, nobody was helping India, Israel did. Okay, so during Kargil war, nobody else helped India, Israel did. And despite American embargo, Israel did all these things. And then that's how we were able to win Kargil war. So they gave us everything from geospatial coordinates to, laser guided munitions and all of those things. Okay, otherwise we would not have won that war. So we have a choice. And then I would also ask all the youngsters, what kind of future society they are aspiring for. Okay, we have two alternatives right in front of us. I lived in Israel. I worked there. I worked as part of their defenses setup. Okay, so I know a lot about their society. So it's a very modern society. Okay, so Israeli girls are trained to become, helicopter pilots, doctors, accountants, dancers and whatnot, right? So they are living their life. It's Jewish culture, Israeli culture is a culture of life, a culture that celebrates life, like our own Hindu culture. Okay, so in India, that's the aspiration we are having. We are when we raise our children, when we Hindus raise our children, or for the reason Christians too, India's Christians, Parsis, and others to except Muslims. Okay, when we raise our children, we are not telling the children, okay, your purpose is to die for religion. No, we are telling them you should become a programmer, you should become a journalist, you should become an accountant, and study for the next 15 years, 20 years, and then become a useful member of society. And we want to enjoy life. All these youngsters would want to live in a society where they can have concerts, where they can have rave parties, where they can fall in love with someone of their choice and they date that person, and go out on motorcycle ride with their girlfriend, and go to a bar occasionally and get a drink. Okay, and maybe one day when India liberalizes cannabis and other things like US has done, many states in the US have done, these people would want to light a joint and have all these things, right? And or dress however they want. Okay, if you want to wear sari, you can do that. If you want to wear miniskirt, you can do that. They would want to do all of these things, and then they would want their wives and their daughters to become highly educated and become entrepreneurs and military generals and police officers and civil servants. That's what they would want. Okay, and that's what Israel is all about. Okay, Israel is about empowering people, letting them live their lives king size. And in contrast, Palestinian culture is the most regressive form of Islamic culture and worldview. Okay, it's about oppressing women, putting them behind the burqa, putting them under the hijab, okay, and not allowing them to go out, work or anything, telling them how to behave and all these things, but also banning all the other nice things in life. You cannot have dance, you cannot have music, you cannot have concerts, then, you cannot have alcohol, you cannot, in many countries, Muslim countries, you cannot even, women cannot drive a car, and, a young couple cannot just romance in a public place or anything, not even hug each other or not even hold each other's hands. Okay, it's that barbaric many of the Muslim countries are, many of the Muslim societies are, and that's what Palestine is all about. Okay, so now if these youngsters still want to support Palestine, then I would like to nominate them for the Darwin Award 2023. Okay, Darwin Award is given out every year for those who eliminate themselves from the gene pool. Okay, so by siding with the Palestinian hate groups, okay, and by opposing Israel, you are actually telling the Muslims, the most bigoted of the Muslims, that hey, I'm a useful idiot. Okay, so I know you are going to do Sat and Sejuda for me, but then I will still be applauding you. Okay, and that's like somebody gave this analogy. That's like a chicken advertising KFC. Yes. Not my own analogy. Somebody came up with that. I think it was Imtiaz Mahmood who came up with that. He said, non-Muslim standing up for pro-Palestine is like a chicken advertising for KFC.
Sir, since we are talking about Indian perspective, would just like to know your opinion on our foreign policy response to Israel. How do you weigh it?
Oh, fantastic. It was fantastic because, Prime Minister Modi straight away called Hamas a terrorist organization, called it a terror attack, and expressed sympathies only with Israel and the people of Israel. Okay. And that was very well received by the Israelis. Okay. You go on Twitter and other places, but also their own official statements, they are all saying India is our number one friendly nation. Okay. And there's a good reason for that. Okay. Because Indians, Hindus and Jews have always had a very cordial relationship. Okay? And this goes back a good couple of thousand years. Okay. So there is a book called Who Are the Jews of India? It's written by Professor Nathan Katz. Okay, that's a book every Hindu must read. In fact, a lot of Jews do read that book, and Hindus must read it, and also, host Professor Nathan Katz and get his perspective. But long story short, he writes about the Jews who settled down in Kochi, in Kerala. We don't know exactly when they settled, but roughly around 2000 years ago. They were facing persecution in what you call Judea or Middle East, and then they come to India as refugees. And then he writes, everywhere in the world, Jews are persecuted, except in India, where they were treated like royalty. Okay, so they flourished, and if you go to Kochi now, you'll still find the Jewish synagogues, and there's a small Jewish community. And even in 1948, when the Jews went back, some of them went back to Israel because Israel had been formed. Still, some of the Jews enlisted in the Indian army to fight the Pakistanis in Kashmir. Okay, and then General Joseph, okay, who liberated Dhaka in 1971, was Jewish. Okay, so he was a Jewish Indian commander. Okay, so India has always had a very wonderful relation with the Jewish people, and the Jewish people and Jews and Hindus have one thing in common, because every country which was colonized went down the drain. Okay, except one nation, India. Okay, we came out in 1947. We never looked back. Okay, we are not talking about the past. We only talked about the future. Okay, that's why we are now sending moon missions and Mars missions and all of these things. And we are making our own vaccines and everything we are doing. We are building our own hypersonic missiles. Okay, we are doing Make in India. We are doing all these things. Jews have the same spirit. Okay, no matter what the past dished out to you, we are not consumed by resentment. We are looking forward to a bright future. So that's why everything Prime Minister Modi did with this was absolutely correct. And same thing, External Affairs Minister and others, they have taken the same stance. Now, for example, in UNGA, when they wanted to call for ceasefire, India abstained, stating as clear reason that you have not mentioned Hamas as terrorists. So we will not vote for this. Okay, brilliant. Okay, and India, some people keep asking, okay, but then India still supports this two-state solution, right? But India is not really supporting it one way or the other. Look, this was written down by the previous Congress governments. It has been there for 60, 70 years. And in international politics, you don't go about necessarily saying, look, I am now rejecting this and I'm embracing something new. You just ignore it and you move on. That's all. Okay. Or you just pay token lip service to that and say, oh, we are still for two-state solution. But the statements you make and then the support you provide after that, that's what makes all the difference. So yeah, I'm very, very happy with the way India has approached this.